Welcome, brave viewers, to a place where the veil between worlds is perilously thin. Tonight we're not just telling stories. We're unlocking doors that were meant to remain sealed, peering into the abyss of human suffering and the chilling legacies left behind. Prepare yourselves as we embark on a chilling journey through the darkest corners of the human mind, exploring institutions that were once called sanctuaries for the troubled, but often became theaters of unimaginable torment. The very walls of these places seem to whisper tales of sorrow and fear, and we are here to listen. Turn down the lights if you dare, and let's begin. The walls have ears, they say, but what if they also have memories? What if the very structure of a place could absorb the pain, the suffering, the sheer terror that occurred within its confines? Our first account delves into such a possibility, a chilling tale from within the grim walls of a state hospital. This story comes from Arthur, an orderly in a state hospital during the late 70s. The air was thick with unspoken stories, the linoleum floors echoing with the ghosts of treatments past. The hospital, a monolith of despair, stood as a testament to a time when mental health was a dark and misunderstood corner of medicine. Within this institution, Ward C was infamous. It wasn't necessarily infamous for its patients, though they certainly had their share of troubles, but for an oppressive atmosphere, a palpable sense of dread that clung to the very air. It was a place where shadows seemed to deepen, and whispers carried on. The wind felt heavier, more burdened. It had a history no one discussed, a past shrouded in secrecy and whispered rumors. The staff avoided the topic, and new employees quickly learned not to ask questions. The files were incomplete, the records spotty, as if someone had deliberately tried to erase the ward's true history. Arthur, being a relatively new and conscientious orderly, was assigned there often. Perhaps it was his calm demeanor or maybe just bad luck, but he found himself drawn to the unsettling atmosphere of Ward C, and it was in Ward C that he met Elias, a patient who would forever change his perception of the hospital, and perhaps reality itself. Elias was a quiet patient, usually withdrawn and docile, but he was plagued by terrifying, nightly episodes. He would thrash in his bed, screaming and crying, his eyes wide with a fear that seemed to transcend his own personal demons. Elias claimed to hear screams, women, children, all begging for help. Their voices, he said, were faint but persistent, a chorus of despair echoing in the dead of night. He insisted they were coming from the very walls. He would press his ear against the cold, cracked plaster, his face contorted in a mixture of terror and empathy. The staff, hardened by years of dealing with the mentally ill, dismissed it as paranoia, another symptom of Elias's condition. They prescribed him stronger sedatives, hoping to quiet the voices in his head, but Arthur noticed Elias's descriptions were disturbingly vivid, far more detailed than the typical ramblings of a paranoid patient. There was a chilling consistency to his accounts, a sense of genuine terror that Arthur couldn't ignore. And these episodes always occurred between 2 and 3 in the morning, the witching hour, when the veil between worlds is said to be at its thinnest. One night, Elias, in the throes of one of his terrifying episodes, grabbed Arthur, pleading, his grip surprisingly strong. "Can't you hear them? They're right there, in the walls." He pointed a trembling finger at the aged plaster, his eyes wide with unspeakable fear. Arthur, deeply unsettled by Elias's genuine terror and the unsettling consistency of his claims, began digging into the hospital's records, searching for any clue that might explain the phenomenon. He discovered that Ward C had once housed experimental treatments that would be considered barbaric by today's standards. Lobotomies, electroshock therapy, and other procedures were performed with alarming frequency, often with little regard for the patient's well-being. It also contained seclusion cells, small dark rooms where patients were often left for days, sometimes weeks, in complete isolation. These cells were meant to be therapeutic, but they often became instruments of torture, driving patients further into madness. Its history was steeped in cruelty, a dark chapter in the annals of mental health care. The walls themselves seemed to absorb the suffering, the pain, the desperation of the patients who had been subjected to such inhumane treatment. Delving deeper, old blueprints revealed a hidden section. This section was located behind a wall near Elias's room, a part of the ward that seemed to have been deliberately concealed. These rooms were erased from modern plans as if someone wanted to completely obliterate them from the hospital's memory. They were a secret, a hidden shame that the institution wanted to keep buried. Driven by a growing sense of dread and a need to understand Elias's torment, Arthur, during a late shift, began to examine the wall near Elias's bed. He tapped along the surface, listening for any change in the sound. Finally, he found a hollow spot. Armed with a pry bar, he carefully pried it open. Behind the wall, he uncovered a series of cramped, hidden rooms, a secret chamber lost to time. Inside, rusted shackles, still bolted to the walls. Crude restraints, fashioned from leather and metal, lay scattered on the floor, and ominous stains that told of unimaginable suffering, a silent testament to the horrors that had transpired within those hidden walls. Arthur realized with a chilling certainty that the screams Elias heard weren't just hallucinations. They were echoes of real torment, the residual energy of pain and suffering trapped in the asylum's walls, forever imprinted on the very fabric of the building. Arthur, shaken to his core, carefully replaced the blocks, sealing the hidden rooms once more. He knew that reporting it would only lead to denial, ridicule, or worse, perhaps even being labeled as mentally unstable himself. He requested and received a transfer out of Ward C as soon as possible, but the memory and the faint, distant screams that sometimes echoed in his mind haunted him for years, a constant reminder of the darkness he had uncovered. The building itself, he realized, was haunted not by ghosts, but by its own history, by the weight of the suffering it had witnessed. Some wounds never heal, they only echo, night after night, a symphony of pain resonating through the corridors of time. And sometimes, no matter how hard we try to bury them, the past refuses to stay buried, clawing its way back to the surface, demanding to be heard. The stories that echo from the past often carry a chilling weight, especially those whispered from the forgotten corners of institutions. This next story comes from Clara, a former patient in a private asylum in the 1950s. These asylums, often shrouded in secrecy and isolation, were worlds unto themselves, where the line between sanity and madness blurred, and the vulnerable were often at the mercy of those in power. She spoke of Mr. Hemlock, an orderly who was polite and helpful by day, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand. He presented a facade of compassion, a comforting presence amidst the sterile environment of the asylum. But beneath the surface lurked a predator by night. Hemlock thrived in the darkness when the asylum fell silent and the patients were at their most vulnerable. The long, shadowy hallways became his hunting ground. He reveled in tormenting vulnerable patients, those who were already struggling with their own inner demons. His methods were insidious, relying on whispered threats and psychological games, carefully designed to break their spirits. He exploited their fears, preying on their insecurities and vulnerabilities with calculated cruelty. Hemlock operated with impunity, knowing no one would believe the delusions of the mentally ill. Their cries for help would be dismissed as mere symptoms of their condition, leaving them trapped in his web of torment. But the darkness he spread, like a creeping vine, began to turn on him. The asylum, a place of suffering, seemed to absorb his malice and reflect it back. Hemlock started hearing footsteps behind him in the dead of night, echoing through the empty corridors when he knew he was alone. He began finding doors ajar, rooms slightly open, a subtle but unsettling violation of the asylum's rigid order. He started feeling cold spots in empty rooms, a sudden drop in temperature that sent shivers down his spine, even on the warmest nights. Whispers echoed back at him from the shadows, faint and indistinct at first, but growing clearer with each passing night. They were his own words, twisted and mocking, a chorus of the suffering he had inflicted, now turned against him. His confidence crumbled, the arrogance that had fueled his cruelty began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of dread. He became paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, convinced that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were following his every move. He was haunted by the spirits of those he'd tormented, their spectral forms appearing in mirrors and at the edges of his vision, a constant reminder of his sins. One night, he was found cowering in a corner of the asylum basement, a place he often used to scare the patients, now his own prison. He was babbling about hands grabbing him from the darkness and faces in the dark, their eyes filled with accusation and rage. He grew erratic, his behavior becoming increasingly unpredictable and volatile. He was aggressive by day, lashing out at his colleagues and the patients, his carefully constructed facade of politeness completely shattered. But he was terrified by night, consumed by the fear of what lurked in the shadows, the unseen forces that were closing in on him. Until one morning, he was found catatonic in his apartment, his eyes wide with terror, his body unresponsive. He was whispering, barely audible, They won't leave me alone, a chilling testament to the torment he was enduring. Hemlock was admitted as a patient, his descent into madness complete. He was brought to the very asylum where he'd once ruled, now stripped of his power and authority, a victim of his own making. Clara saw it as grim justice, a fitting end for a man who had reveled in the suffering of others. It was as if the darkness he inflicted had come for him, a karmic reckoning for his cruel deeds. The spirits of the wronged, she believed, had finally found their voice, their collective pain manifesting as a force of retribution. They had claimed their vengeance, turning the tables on their tormentor and driving him to the brink of insanity. Hemlock became another lost soul within the asylum's walls, his identity consumed by the very madness he had exploited. His reign of terror was replaced by his own personal nightmare, a terrifying reflection of the suffering he had caused. In asylums like these, where the boundaries between sanity and madness were so fragile, cruelty never goes unpunished for long. The darkness always finds a way to return to its source. Sometimes the ghosts that haunt us aren't external entities, but the memories we create, the consequences of our own actions echoing through the corridors of time. Our final story tonight comes from Eleanor. It's a chilling tale, one that lingers in the mind long after it's been told. It speaks of secrets, of hidden places, and the darkness that can reside within the walls of even the most seemingly ordinary institutions. Prepare yourself, for this is not a story for the faint of heart. Eleanor was a young, bright-eyed nurse, fresh out of training, when she took a position at Blackwood Manor in the early 80s. Blackwood Manor, a psychiatric hospital with a long and somewhat troubled history, stood on a hill overlooking the town, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. From her very first day, Eleanor noticed an undercurrent of unease amongst the staff. Whispers followed her down the long, echoing corridors. The staff whispered about a perpetually locked room, Storage 7, a place shrouded in mystery and hushed tones. It was located on the top floor, far from the hustle and bustle of the main wards, a place where shadows danced and secrets seemed to cling to the very air. The top floor was a world unto itself, isolated and forgotten. Eleanor's curiosity grew with each passing day, fueled by the hushed conversations and the palpable sense of dread that seemed to emanate from the direction of Storage 7. She noticed the heavy iron-locked door, its surface scarred and weathered by time, a silent testament to the secrets it held. Adding to the mystery was the strange, metallic odor seeping from beneath it, a scent that hinted at something unnatural, something long forgotten and best left undisturbed. It was a smell that clung to the back of her throat, a constant reminder of the room's unsettling presence. Her questions about the room were met with silence and warnings from the senior staff, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and disapproval. They told her it was best left alone, that some doors are better left unopened. But Eleanor was not easily deterred. The mystery had taken root in her mind, and she couldn't let it go. The more she was warned, the more determined she became to uncover the truth behind Storage 7. One night, while working the late shift, fate intervened. She found the head nurse's keys unattended on her desk, a gleaming set of old iron keys, each one a potential gateway to the hospital's hidden corners. Among them, she recognized the ornate iron key that opened Storage 7. It felt heavy in her hand, a weight of responsibility and impending dread. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, and despite the warnings echoing in her mind, Eleanor made her way to the top floor. Alone, heart pounding in her chest, she unlocked Storage 7. The lock clicked open with a resounding echo that seemed to amplify the silence around her. She pushed the heavy door open and stepped into a room thick with the stench of decay and chemicals, a suffocating aroma that assaulted her senses. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through a grimy window, illuminating a scene of unsettling neglect. The walls were padded with something like hardened leather, stained and cracked with age, a grim reminder of the room's former purpose. The padding seemed to absorb the sound, creating an eerie silence that amplified the feeling of isolation. A single bolted chair sat in the center of the room, its leather straps hanging loose, a chilling testament to the treatments that had once been administered within those walls. It was a stark and unsettling image, a symbol of the room's dark history. Surrounding the chair were archaic medical instruments, their surfaces coated in a layer of dust and grime. They were tools of a bygone era, instruments of pain and suffering that spoke of a time when mental illness was poorly understood and cruelly treated. On a shelf, she found a stack of old leather-bound journals, their pages filled with the frantic scribblings of a doctor obsessed with curing a violent patient, a doctor who had clearly crossed the line between science and madness. As she delved deeper into the journals, she discovered that his methods had devolved into isolation, a cruel and inhumane attempt to break the patient's spirit. Deprivation, stripping away everything that made the patient human, leaving him a shell of his former self. And finally, crude experiments, procedures that defied all ethical boundaries and left Eleanor reeling in horror. The final entries hinted at a final solution, a desperate and terrifying attempt to silence the patient forever. The doctor's handwriting became increasingly erratic, his words filled with a chilling sense of urgency. Then, abruptly, the entries stopped. The patient vanished from all records as if he had never existed. His name was erased, his file disappeared, leaving behind only a void in the hospital's history. As Eleanor read the chilling details, a growing sense of unease washed over her. She felt a presence in the room, a cold spot that seemed to follow her every move. She heard a faint whisper, a barely audible murmur that sent shivers down her spine. She felt a cold presence, as if she were no longer alone in the room. The air grew heavy, and the shadows seemed to deepen, pressing in on her from all sides. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the door slammed shut, plunging her into complete darkness, trapping her in darkness, a prisoner of the very secrets she had sought to uncover. Panic set in, a wave of terror threatening to overwhelm her. She stumbled blindly through the darkness, frantically searching for a way out, until she found a latch, a small metal lever hidden near the doorframe. With trembling hands, she pulled the latch and escaped, stumbling out of the room, shaken to her core by what she had discovered. Reporting her discovery to the hospital administrator led only to denial and thinly veiled threats. They dismissed her concerns, warning her to forget what she had seen and to never speak of it again. Shortly thereafter, she was quietly dismissed. Her career at Blackwood Manor abruptly ended. Eleanor never returned to Blackwood Manor, forever haunted by the secrets she had uncovered. But she knew the truth. Some rooms are locked for a reason, and some secrets are best left buried. The real horror of Blackwood Manor wasn't a ghost or a malevolent spirit, but the chilling memory of what people are capable of behind closed doors, the darkness that can fester within the human heart. Blackwood's secrets remained sealed, locked away behind its imposing walls, festering in the dark, a breeding ground for untold horrors. Some wounds, she realized with a chilling certainty, are not just scars on the skin, but places, locations imbued with pain and suffering. And some doors, no matter how tempting, should never be opened, for the darkness they conceal may consume you whole. Our journey through these haunted asylums ends here, but the echoes remain. These stories remind us that darkness can linger in the very walls we build. If you want more tales from the shadows, like and subscribe. Some stories once heard are not easily forgotten. They linger like a chill in the air. Sleep tight, if you can.